So a hunter, they really would do well to put a lot of confidence in their deer calling abilities, capabilities. Deer calls can be a hunter's #1 dynamite killer tactic in November to shoot a big, mature trophy buck. Deer calling can be extremely effective. I can't stress it enough that when done right, when blown right, when used right, when a deer call, a manufactured deer call is used correctly, and you're using it to sound very realistic, you can't hurt your hunt. You're not going to scare deer with it. And I'm going to show you in this exact video, this episode you're watching now, you're going to see real live examples, real time examples of where I'm calling to deer. And you're going to see their reactions, see them flicker their tail in contentment and go back to grazing. You're going to see that they heard it. It's not scaring them. I'm not spooking the deer. They're not running away. But they just aren't in the mood at that time to come to the deer. But they probably just assumed that deer was calling there in the woods, was on a trail, heading a different direction, and is walking away from them anyway. See if I can call him back in. So he's right there. I want you guys to see him. He's right. There he is. See him? There we go. He hears it. He's not scared. See, he's not afraid of it. You can't hurt. They call it. They're not afraid. As long as the call sounds like a deer, you cannot hurt your hunt. Yeah, so he's still right there. I can see him. Yeah, so that as long as your deer call sounds realistic, sounds like a deer, and you're using it right, you can't scare any deer. It's just, you have deer that will come right into it because they're feeling very social. They're in the mood to come take a look, see what other deer moved in the area. And you have deer that will ignore it. They'll look up, listen, look back to your direction. But they'll go wag their tail and go back to grazing. But you're not going to want to scare them. If you get that one mature trophy buck in the mood, man. You got that one buck laying down scrapes, thrashing trees, running a scrape line, wanting to do bucky things, really interested in kicking the butt of any intruder bucks, any other bucks coming into his home range. It was there. You could very well call him in. You come right in on a string, man, by calling. You can't hurt. It only increases your chances at getting a big mature buck. It didn't scare the deer. It didn't hurt my hunt. Put a lot of faith and confidence in your calling. Watch a lot of videos on it. Watch the instructional how-to videos. Read the instructions on the call that you buy and learn it to a T. Figure it all out, how it all works, and get all the sounds down packed so that you sound like a real deer out there. So I want to share with you today 3 calling tactics that you can use in November that are dynamite, that will help you fill your buck tag. The number 1 call-in tactic that I like to use, that I've used with great success through the years, through the 30 plus years that I've been hunting. Yes, I'm that old, if not older. I've got a lot of experience on my belt. I've heard a lot of real live vocalizations from deer. I've called in deer that have been come in grunting back at me and come in bleating back at me. I've got on video, real live video footage of deer calling. And so one call-in tactic that I love to do that you can use to your advantage too this time of year is when from a tree stand set, when up in your saddle or your tree stand, you can do some blind calling every 15 minutes. About every 10 to 15 minutes this time of year, you should do a call-in sequence. And you should start out on one side of your tree and make it sound like a buck moving and tending a doe behind the doe. Then just a couple seconds after stopping the tending grunting, you can do some estrus bleats at the end, and do that exact calling sequence that you just saw me do right now, every 10 to 15 minutes, blind calling. And this time of year, man, it will impress you at how many more deer you'll see during hunting season doing that from your tree stand sets. And it'll impress you at how much more successful you'll be in years to come, putting faith in that exact calling sequence I just showed you, doing that like every 10 to 15 minutes. And on windy days, you can call much more. It's calm right here, right now. If it's calm and not that windy, you could do just you can mimic what I just did just there every 10 to 15 minutes and don't call anymore. But if it's windy, you can call much more and call louder. And then come back around. So you just got to read the conditions and the climate. If is it windy? Is it calm? Is it real cold or warm? On cold, frosty mornings, calm with no wind, sound travels further, and your calling's going to sound louder. So you can call a little lower volume and not call quite as often. But as the wind picks up, it's windier, you want to have confidence that the deer can hear your calling. You want them to hear it. So if the wind picks up a bit, you might want to increase your volume and call a little more. Wait a second, then grunt again. Wait a few more seconds, grunt. Then you might stop. You might choose to just do that every 5 minutes. You can. That's another call. Just doing deer contact, deer social type calls. It's just you mimicking a deer saying, hey, I'm a deer over here. Hey, are you over there, Joe Blow? Hey, Susie Q, where are you at? You know, it's just deer looking for other deer and wanting to be social. So they're doing some contact calling as they're walking through the woods. But obviously this time of year, being the rut, bucks are grunting almost every step, and they're tending does and doing the tendon grunting. And they might stand still and let out a kind of a more frustrated guttural type grunt because a doe is not standing still, so he can mount her or whatever, and he might do that. That's just another type of grunt that a buck will give in the rut. That's a good call to do. And that can really fire up a mature older buck that might think there's a subordinate satellite type buck, younger buck with a doe in heat, and it might bring in that big boy, come in looking for a fight to take over, to be the next suitor in line for that doe that's in heat. So, man, there's all kinds of calls that you've got to learn here. And I could go on and on all day. This could be a long-winded 2-hour or longer video about me showing explaining the different calls that deer make and the reasons why they make those calls and what they sound, showing you what they sound like, what they all mean, and explaining the best times of year to use all those different calls, so forth and so on. There's year-round calling you could do. So from your stand, saddle, blind, whatever, going along with this first call-in tactic that I'm sharing with you, the first of the 3 call-in strategies or tactics that I'm going to share with you in this video, you can just do the contact call-in year-round. This is the way you can call in does, bucks, or yearlings year-round. You could just do that every so many minutes, every 5-10 minutes, and that you could do that in September, October, November, December. You could do it year-round. I've done that exact call-in for a project in school. It was a biology project on call-in deer vocalizations. I got an A on it. And I was doing that in the dead of winter, doing some contact calling. And I had my friend Jason filming me and taking pictures of me, of deer coming in while I was calling. He's got a picture of me with a deer out there like 50 yards away from me with a deer call in my mouth. And I've done that in December, January time. And I've had deer, because I was tucked away, hidden in the thick pines in the shadows. I was hidden well, and the wind was right, and the thermals were right. They couldn't smell me. I had deer come in grunting back, looking for that deer that they heard that they thought was in there, but it was really me mimicking to be a deer. And I've had deer in the dead of winter come in grunting to call back to the deer. They were looking for the deer. They wanted to come hang with that deer, socialize, be social and such, so forth, so on. So the number 2 call-in tactic or strategy, if you will, that you could use in November to fill that buck tag is slip hunting. Or you could call it still hunting or scout hunting. I call it all 3 things. Slip hunting nearby known deer bedding areas, especially hone in on a doe bedding area, an area that you know does frequently bed and rest up or hold during midday, during the majority part of the day, and nearby where does feed. You could just, and you want to sound like a deer. Deer have 4 feet making noise as they're walking through the woods. You have 2. You sound different than a deer, a possum, squirrel, anything with 4 feet for that matter walking through the woods. You sound different. You have the 2 feet instead of the 4. So you might want to take like 4 steps and stop and then grunt. And like stop and listen for a few seconds and look, observe your surroundings before you take a few more steps. And this is slip hunting. And you've got to make a game plan before you use this approach, this strategy this November. Know where you want to go. You want to slip hunt into bedding areas to where you think there's, especially in lockdown time, when does are in estrus or heat and a buck's holding with that doe for 3 or more days, 2 to 3 days plus. And he's following her every mood. He's bedding with her. He's getting up, feeding with her. And they're not moving far and moving much, especially if they're mating. If the doe is standing still, letting the buck mount her, they're not going far. That buck's also chasing her and courting her and corralling her in like a thermal hub area, an area where it's thick, where it's secluded, safe, where they feel safe, where it's thick, where you almost have to get on your hands and knees to crawl through. A big mature old buck could be holding a doe, and that's in heat in an area like that, in a bedding area, and they're not going far, they're not moving far. That's the lockdown phase. So when you stop seeing a lot of deer sightings, and you're seeing yearlings like fawns, younger deer all over the place, that means that their older mother is in heat and estrus. She's got a buck and several bucks shooting her and chasing her and holding her up in a thick area while they're all trying to mount her and they're chasing her around and so forth. And the bucks might be fighting and chasing one another off, trying to be the next suitor in line for that doe. So this time of year, you could, especially in the lockdown phase, in the peak of the rut, this is a good tactic to use, a good approach to go fill your buck tag. But you've got to have that plan. You got to know where those doe bedding areas are and go towards them real slow and easy. And just take 4 steps, stop, and grunt, let out a grunt. And you want to be watching your surroundings and kind of plan your next move. On the next 4 steps you make, you might want to go towards a tree trunk. You might want to stay in the dark shadow, stay out of the sunlight, so you don't have the sun illuminating you, so you don't expose yourself. You might want to read the woods, be woods wise, showcase your woodsmanship skills, and follow the shadows, and maybe wait for a wind gust to come up before you move. So if the wind might die down, you might want to stop at that point and let out a call. And maybe another. And then kind of just wait and listen. Stuff could happen fast. A buck could come charging in super quick when doing the slip hunting calling tactic. He could come running up out of that bedding area thinking there's another buck wanting to come in and take his doe. Or that buck is alone. That's going to be the easiest one to call in. And if that buck's alone and bedding, he's in that thick bedding area. And he's holed up and waiting and bedding midday. It's windy and warm, and he's exhausted from running all night, chasing does all night. That mature buck could be bedded in there. And those are going to be the easier ones to call to you. He could come in quick, looking for a fight or looking for that other deer. So you want to stay with the shadows, stay out of the sun and walk. Say, okay, I'm going to go to that dark shadowy area by that tree trunk and make your steps that way. And then call. And wait, listen. Call again. And then plan your next approach. Okay, I'm going to take my next 4 steps that way. And you stay with the dark shadows, move with the tree trunk, stay hidden, and kind of plan a walk-in approach towards the bedding area and like sort of in a vantage point. Stay kind of on higher ground to where you could have good visibility to see approaching deer and hear approaching deer. And you want to have ample shooting lanes. So you're going to take all that into consideration. Staying out of the sunlight, move with a wind gust, and when it's calm, stay still and do some contact calls and just wait and listen, observe, wait for a wind gust to come up, and then make your steps. And also stay like on higher ground, kind of high up, and also think about the thermals, how the thermals are working in the area. They're bedded in like a thermal hub where all the thermals around them are dumping all the surrounding scents into their bedding area. So you want to stay on higher ground where it's warmer, where the sun's shining on that slope or that ridge, and the morning thermals, the heating of the Earth's atmosphere and stuff is pulling your thermals upward and pulling your scent away from that bedding area. You've got to consider all that. Think of the thermals, how they're playing a factor where you're going, and have the wind in your face and such and so forth. So on, you got to take all this into consideration when making that plan, that approach for using the slip hunting, calling tactic strategy, if you will, to go and fill that buck tag. Now, the third call-in tactic that I use, and why I like to use this call-in tactic, is because I self-film. So this third call-in tactic that I'm going to share with you, it's similar to slip hunting, but it's helpful for this tactic, call-in hunting approach, is great for someone that's trying to film their hunt and self-film and is carrying cameras. I have the 4th Arrow camera arm stick with the main camera on it and GoPro attached to my scope. So I'm trying to film my hunt. So what I'll do is I might pick out a bedding area to sneak into to kind of work my way towards. And what I'll do is I stay with the dark shadows, the same as I mentioned in the second approach. And I'd stay on higher ground and I'd keep moving in areas where I'll have shooting lanes, where I'll have a vantage point, be able to see the lower elevation, see the bedding areas, and see approaching deer and hear approaching deer. And what I'll do is I'll still take the few steps and stop and listen, but I'm not calling yet. I'll hold off on this third call-in tactic or hunting call-in tactic that I'm sharing with you. I'll hold off on the call-in until I'm in position with a good vantage point with plenty of shooting lanes, and I'm in a spot where I feel like I could call in a deer, because I'm setting up my main camera, getting my camera set up, and I'm getting settled in before I start my call-in sequences. So I'll move like 100 yards slowly, just still hunting, going slow, stopping every few steps to listen and look and observe. And I'll move a few more steps, stop and listen, look. I'll move about 100 yards and get into a good vantage point, and I'll set up shop with my cameras on, and then I'll do the call-in sequence. Then I'll do the buck tendon grunting. And I might end with some bleat. Then I'll just wait it out, and then another 5 minutes I might do that same exact call-in sequence again, and I'll sit there probably a half hour top, maybe 40, somewhere between 30 minutes to an hour. I'll stay in that location, that spot where I'm doing that call-in every 5 minutes. And after the last call-in sequence, I'll wait probably 20 minutes and then decide to move if I'm not hearing anything, seeing anything. Then I'll be confident that there's nothing in earshot, and I'm not seeing any deer, and I'm not hearing any deer. Then I'll pack up my camera gear and all that, put away my calls, and then I'll move another 100 yards. I'll still hunt another 100 yards, getting closer towards the bedding areas. So I've done my first call-in sequence a ways off, a couple 100 yards off of the bedding area. And I'll move another 100 yards. If nothing, I didn't call anything in, and I'm not confident there's no deer around. Move another 100 yards. And I'll stop every so many steps, sort of listen and look, observe. And when I get another 100 yards, I'll set up shop again. I'll set up my cameras, get my calls out. I'll make sure I'm in a good vantage point to have good shooting lanes and see all the way around. And then I'll do the tendon grunting again. Some bleat. And I'll do that call-in sequence every 5 minutes or so, or every 5 or 10 minutes for about an hour in that location. And if nothing happens, it's not producing any action, then I'll pack up again and move another 100 yards and inch my way closer to the bedding area. And in November, I was doing this exact tactic one day after school many eons ago when I was a young hunter. I knew of a bedding area that does bedded in, bucks. I just knew there had to be a buck holed up in this certain bedding area. I just knew there was, and I chose to beeline it to that general location. I got close. Once I got close to the bedding area, then I started calling every so many steps. I'd do 3 or 4 steps, and I'd stop and grunt. And I'd do another 3 or 4 steps and grunt. I was slip hunting into this bedding area and calling every so many steps. I was making myself sound like a deer walking through, and I was also, I was trying to sound like a deer walking, but I was also calling. So I was sounding like a deer in 2 different ways. And oh man, when I heard that deer coming, I was, well, you can imagine I was a young hunter and hadn't shot that many at that point in time. This was back in high school. And I love sharing this story because I'll never forget it. And this white rack, this buck clearly bedded somewhere where he got a lot of sun. It bleached his antlers out and stuff, wherever he bedded the majority of his life. But he come up out of his bed, and he'd come to take a look, and he was only out there like 50 yards. But I had open sights, 12-gauge pump shotgun with a slug, with no scope. And a lot of stuff was in the way. I didn't have a clear, ethical shot at him. But he come in to take a look, and he was looking, listening, smelling. And he was just so close. I'll never forget that ghostly white rack moving around in the trees. He was a 3-plus-year-old buck. And being a young hunter and a buck that old and that big, man, you can imagine how I was feeling, what my heart was doing. I'll never forget it. That's why I love sharing this story. But I was using the slip hunt call-in tactic approach to get this buck up out of his bed to come take a look. And I could have filled that buck tag right then and there in that day, that Saturday. But I mentioned it was after school. It was after school that I did that. But it wasn't until the following Saturday that I did get my buck, a different 8-pointer that I was tickled pink with. I was so excited, ecstatic for. And I called that deer, and it took Colin to get that deer coming in and take a look. And I put my tag on a nice 8-pointer a week after that experience where I was doing that slip hunt Colin tactic approach. I'm slipping into a bedding area, trying to call a buck up out of his bed to come take a look. Things can happen quick when you're using these strategies. Any one of these 3 call-in tactics in November, action can happen fast. You could have deer come running, charging right into your lap. If you want to stay alert at all times, stay ready with your camera and you get that shot on. I hope that you learned something here today. If you could, please, before you go, smash that like button for me, and subscribe to Spikes and Gills and click the notification bell so you'll be notified of all future uploads if you're not already. I greatly appreciate your support. Follow everybody. And if you could, check out my PayPal links in the descriptions below all my videos for my 2 books, Wild Maine Outdoors, Hunting Tactics, Tricks, and Secrets, and the Sit Spot, Discovering the Forest Near You. There's PayPal links to order any one of those books or both of those books. The Wild Maine Outdoors, Hunting Tactics, Tricks, and Secrets, and the Sit Spot, Discovering the Forest Near You. And then there's the shopping icon to browse my Spikes and Gills merch. You can click on that to browse the hoodies and t-shirts. There's a winter hat available if you click on the Teespring store and go in there, and you can browse the store. So you can check out Spikes and Gills merch. Great, appreciate the support. Follow everybody. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something here today. So smash the like button before you go. Greatly appreciate it. All right, see you in the next episode.